Okay,
Okay.
we got it.
Uh-huh. Good evening
Yeah.
or good afternoon, depending on where you are. This is the Israel Association of Writers in English, uh, beginning again with new books. That is every year. This is our first recording of the year, with new books from many different directions. Four writers, Simon Lichman and Bar-Dov, Michael Kagan, and myself, and we're going to be talking about our latest books. Uh, I'm going to turn this over to uh, Mike Stone, who will introduce our first reader.
Okay. Our first reader will be Simon Lichman, and he'll tell us a little bit about himself and then uh, talk talk about his books and read from poems. Okay,
Okay.
Simon? Yeah,
Yep. Okay.
all
So,
yours.
just for the sake of time and stuff, I don't like to write introductions down, but I did anyway. So the book's called The Punished Wound. It was published by Pale Whale Press in London in 2003. But it was hard. It was hard to celebrate while the war was going, so it feels very new. And you've already seen my wonderful editor, Camilla Reeve. The title of the book refers to Dennis Silk's book, also in general about the land. It's called The Punished Land. Um, the poems began arriving in 1971
I
when I
must
first came to.
interrupt. I
Yes,
must interrupt, Simon,
yes.
because the screen has to be changed, and it is
Ah,
Mike that has to
Ah,
change the
okay,
screen.
okay.
okay.
You're going over
Sorry.
to.
But now you have to begin
Oh,
your
oh, that's
introduction
great.
again.
Okay.
Um, all of it. Okay, right. So the book is called The Punished Wound, and it was published by Pale Whale Press in London in 2023. And if you didn't hear, I said that it because of I wasn't really able to celebrate it because of the war. Not sure I can celebrate it now either, but anyway, I feel that it's all right, and I'm happy to do so. Very happy to do so. And the marvelous editor of Pale Whale Press is Camilla Reeve, who you can see also on your screen. Hi, Camilla.
Right.
The title refers to Dennis Silk's book, The Punished Land. The poems began arriving in 1971 when I first came to live in Jerusalem from London. The collection begins with sections on homelessness or refugee wanderings in general and the physical landscape, our relationship to the environment, moving to the main body of the book, the landscape of conflict. After graduating from the Hebrew University with a BA in English literature in 75, I went back to England with my partner Ravana in order to research the Marshfield Paperboys mumming play for a PhD in folklore, which I completed at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, returning to Israel in 1981 to start a career as a university lecturer. I decided after a bit that I wanted to work in the field, as it were, and in 1991 created an NGO, an Amutah, to bring Jewish and Arab communities together, mostly through school pairing programs based on the collection and exchange of participants' folklore or home culture. In a way, these poems tell the story of what drew me to this work and what I was feeling while I was doing it, in the context of a situation becoming progressively worse and more complex, a punished wound. Translation, Shalom, East Monsoon and Village School were written in some of the communities in which we worked. On cold days, Latrun nestles in its furs. That is to say, I have seen the sun glance off the edges of these fields, where the unusual heaviness of snow stands technicolor shoots out from the solid clay. Mist drops to fill corridors of alcoves with the changing shape of heaven. I can believe in paradise to have witnessed light such as this until the next car bursts by, the next hand casts its first stone. of dreams and children. But did you have a friend such as this, a friend who was ill, that you could not reach? Hold out your hand, I'll take you through. I'll take you through. Or if you had a son, loved him, watched him grow, and he grew into Absalom, swinging you from the tree with your hair all tangled, what would you do? What would you do, my friend? Perhaps, if only a little, you might lament. Yours, mine, yours, mine. Tired land beats the boots we wear, never winning, never losing, never leaving alone. Our windows face towards Kiryat Yovel. So, towards Kiryat Yovel, the Humpty Pearl of sun sinks behind Jubilee Hill, red blood to pastel crescent, quick glow quickening, dusk come darkness. For there is no unconditional half-light where boundaries blur into a world unseen, and we pretend electric stars welcome us as we are. The activities in our programs are based on things that happen at home culture. So children will learn about games that parents and grandparents played in their childhoods, or traditional food. And then we have activities around these things where parents and grandparents help the children. One of the activities, for example, is making pickles together. Translation. Sitting within, and there's always a question of hospitality, like what should we give them? What would they like? What wouldn't they like? Translation. Sitting within the dream of being seen, they discuss how much of this, how much of that to serve their guests. Light slanting into the grey room between branches and the dampish day. We are not locked into the vagaries of diplomacy or hardening hearts. Ignited expectation raises us into a warmer space where we can learn the dignity of many tongues. This poem was written in Ein Rafa, the village of Ein Rafa, which is opposite Abu Ghosh, where we've worked for about 30 years. In the early hours of last Thursday, it was attacked by Tag Mechir, who destroyed cars and wrote slogans all over the place. My Hebrew name is Shalom. Shalom. They beat their tiny wings against my back, according to the pace of running after. To say those little things in words too few, we share. Thank you, Simon. How are you, Simon? They like to use my name, but it is not enough to stand between what is and all that was, is not enough to keep the roads paved and the crops intact. Yet I will pit the promise of this name against the gathering clouds of summer snow that rots the roots of all we grow. East monsoon. Thus the snippy, snappy crocodile with the slippy, slidey eyes glides from shallow glades to grab our legs and drag us, drowning down, as the birds sing and the sun slants over a lagoon, airlessly asking ourselves, how come the steely jaws still take us by surprise? Barracuda shoals patiently encircling filigree hope, shining through the eyes of the otherwise despairing young, thrown into a conflict they had not begun, that shreds the flesh of future from their supple bones. Yet they look at you with the intensity of fresh love, leavened by equality, and you want to say, it will always be this way. Holiest of holies echoing, how do we make justice stay? Do we make justice stay? Make justice stay? Make justice, justice stay? Benaya Zuckerman and Uri Grossman were both program graduates of ours. One died on a bus that was blown up and the other in the army. For Benaya, these are the fallen, not the mighty nor the good, the gorgeous nor the wise, but a chance collection of sound bits rubbing shoulders with each other for perhaps the only time in this waft unbeing to having just begun. Arms of silhouette toward a sun at noon, edged by desert craters, wondering in the space of whatever happened to. 4 little boxes for Uri. Once upon a time, there were 3 little foxes who didn't wear stockings and they didn't wear sockses. But they all had handkerchiefs to blow their noses, and they kept their handkerchiefs in cardboard boxes. They lived in the forest in 3 little houses, and they didn't wear coats and they didn't wear trousers. They ran through the woods on their bare little tootsies, and they played touch last with a family of mouses. It's an A.A. Milne poem. We bury another of our children's friends in a neat row of 4 little shockses. They wear plain tullises and don't wear sockses, and they play touch last in misled boxes. Village school, for we know this is neither a game of hopscotch nor a jar of pickles, this devastation pure and simple. Addled eyes and butchered souls, what do the policymakers see in the stone abodes and stripped olive tree when they close, if they close their eyes, what do they see? Nations spilling opportunity in the unthinking grasp of idle stores and desert beds. Doves unfreed from floods, gannets from oil slicks, birds of prey patrolling splintered lands who cannot separate honey from curdled milk, flowing from affliction, dry rock from contemplation. Sorry, my speaker's playing up.
Let me just take this moment to ask everyone to mute themselves because we're getting a lot of back noise. And can I ask Mike to enlarge Simon's screen so that we can see him?
I think whenever he speaks.
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
You have to
Whenever I
choose.
speak,
And
Yeah, I see him on a big screen now.
oh, okay. Then maybe it records that way.
It's not gallery view from here. I don't know if we can make it gallery view on our.
No.
Okay. So that you do see.
Yeah.
All right. So then
Whoever speaks right now, the only thing we can do is maybe mute ourselves, and then there will only be one speaker at a time. Okay.
that might be a good idea for.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's in the individual. Sorry.
right?
Continue, Simon.
Yeah. So can I
Interrupt.
go? Yeah. So there's a joke about there's a joke about a drowning person who asks God for his help, and he ignores what he's offered. It turns up in this poem. Flat iron flood, because the flat iron heart of here. Sorry, let me start again. Because in the flat iron heart of here lies our intention to be blessed above all other living things, with a voice to sing, an eye to record the way weight grinds us into dust begun. The now, now of the then, drumming from mists of distant past to futures refused to see. I sent you blueprints and a basic list of what not to do. I sent a book and another and another. Global warning too. Arms around necks of animal and tree, taken down to breathless images we cannot free. July to August 2014, there was a war in Gaza going on. Unable to travel to my great niece's bat mitzvah in London, I write to friends and relations, at least we are safe. For safe, read alive. For alive, do not read hopeful, looking forwards, ebullient, carefree. If I've written one poem to accompany all the others about this punished wound, let's say it is enough. Enough people, did you ask? Enough poetry? No full stops. So here's a page of paper, traditionally white, I suppose, because black words bounce best into meanings set. Phrase, sentence, comma, stops and starts, dancing life on surfaces crisp and clean. When really, I'm wondering about another poem describing yet another scene, where bodies are the page and sops of blood are sentence, comma, phrase. This is the last poem in the book. Beit Yalla, backwards, forwards. Yet these same silver clouds, rolling grey steel mauve over long-loved hills, shifting light on terraces, shell-white towers, shape-changing sky lakes, offering some suggestion that beyond it all there might be tranquility. And I ask myself this same question with the same heaviness of heart, from whence cometh direction to dissolve wills that disunite, dismember and delude, damage down, disable, imagining flash of blue, touch of scarlet, a poem or two. For this is the story of a more than half-lived life, struggling into an order of its own with this one thread of reason, making things, as if to say, this could be better, it will be so. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, Simon, that was incredible.
Yeah.
That was beautiful, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Definitely.
Camila, you must be very proud.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was really something.
I feel a renewed sense of pride and awe in listening to Simon read these poems out
Yes.
loud. It brings even more to them.
Yeah. Well, Simon, I hope you'll provide us all with a list of all the books that you read from, or or is it
No,
just the
one-
one book? Is it just the one book? Wow.
Afterward,
You're
we'll
on
have
mute, Simon.
Yeah.
afterward we'll have a discussion, and
Yeah.
I hope Simon and will tell us exactly where to get the book
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Thank you.
when, and
Yeah.
maybe we will have another reading because
Yes.
it sounds like the whole book
Yeah.
must be fascinating.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. The next reader or sharer of information is about what she's working on, what she's writing, is Anne Bar-Dov, and she'll tell you more about herself and what she's doing. So I pass
Okay.
the wand to Anne.
Well, greetings. My name is Anne Bar-Dov, and I can tell you about myself that I was born in Brooklyn, and I moved to Israel in 1976, and I moved to the Galilee in 1983. And I can also tell you that although I've been writing my entire life, it was only after I retired that I began to really pick up the pace and publish and so on. This is my new book. It's called Picnic on Vesuvius. I didn't have an editor. I didn't have a designer. I did the whole thing myself. I'm extremely proud of myself for having done so. And you can ask yourself, what's the connection between Picnic on Vesuvius and the theme of tonight, which is in every generation? And I thought about this long and hard, and I realized that the connection is that the book bears witness to what I think is a common thread winding through generations of Jewish existence, which is essential existential anxiety. We're a very unsettled bunch, and throughout history, we've been traipsing around from pillar to post, being kicked out of here and trying to make a living there. And the chronic uneasiness generated by this instability has permanently permeated Jewish DNA and manifests itself both overtly and covertly. Okay? So I will read you Picnic on Vesuvius, and you can hear the manifestation of it. That's the title poem of this book. Picnic on Vesuvius. It's so nice here. Just look at that view, at the hills beyond, at the sleepy villages spread out down below. Pass the salt. These eggs taste good with mustard. Is there anything left to drink? The ground beneath us is warm. Well, the sun is out. Let's not think about those little puffs of smoke rising beyond the trees. The metallic tang in the air? That's just the way the air smells here. And that faint rumble? Just a far-off edge of thunder. Look at the birds. Look at the lovely flowers. Amazing how a bit of rain can make even a desert bloom. Have some more potato chips. The potatoes are grown here too. What a good spot for a picnic. You just have to ignore that slight shaking vibration underneath. So, when I began organizing the poems that would eventually appear in this collection, I was not aware just how many of them contained this anxiety. After all, the book includes love poems, satirical stuff, poems about health, the absence of it, poems about the weather. It's not all explicit political gloom and doom. But when I looked over the finished book, I saw echoes of this anxiety in every single thing. Some of it was more overt, some of it was more covert. And I can read you a few examples of it. You know, how this thing is always with us. Mike, I won't use the scroll. I'll just, persevere. Okay. The thing I'm going to read you now was told, the essentials of it was told to me by my mother. It is a true story. My immigrant story. We were on the boat, steerage passage to America, pitching, rolling, now sea, now sky, moldy bread, tainted water, a river of stinking muck down below, the screams of my children as it slid over them. Up on deck was different, not better. Spray in the air too thick to breathe, the deck too slimed with wet to risk moving. I grabbed a rail and held on tight, not to be swept into the sea, me and the little ones clutching my skirts, one on each side, and the baby, her tiny red face puckered in rage, wild for the milk she could barely squeeze out. And then, here he came, striding down the deck, in a black top hat smashed down on his skull, and a black tailcoat whipping out behind him. He came over to me as I clung to the rail, and straining against the shriek of the wind, put close to my ear the following: "You are alone on this ship? No man?" I shook my head as a round, freckled woman came up by his side and looked long and hard at the babe in my arms and spoke low to her man, for he was her man. And he turned to me with a confident smile and held out his hand, and there was a purse, a drawstring purse, heavy it hung, and he said, "Take it." I stared at him. "For what?" I said, and he answered me, "For the child in your arms. You are alone with 3 little ones, alone on your way to an unknown land. It will be hard for you to manage with 3, less hard with 2, and less hard still with 2 and with money. Take it," he said. "Give me that child. It is so young, you barely know it. You will marry again, you will have other babes." I remember the children at my skirts made no sound. I remember the round woman nodding as she stretched out her arms. I remember the heavy swing of that purse. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember what I did, but I must have said no, because now here you are, child of the child of the child of that child, listening to my words, writing them down, my immigrant story. And this is the most basic thing that you can take, that you can rely on, is that you know who your parents are, and not necessarily. Okay? So, and we know that even if things seem to be fine, they can change in an instant. Here's something that I wrote pretty soon after my family had moved to Misgav, Moatza Ezorit Misgav, not Misgav Am, okay, which is surrounded by Arab cities and towns, and it was a big difference from living around Sfat. It was exhilarating at that time. I was getting used to interactions with all different kinds of people, and there was this mood. This is 1995 of changes in the air, and things are going to be better. Okay, November 1995. A day back then when I still thought peace was possible. Gold afternoon sun, still autumn air. We took the kids to Sachnin in Arabe to see the celebration of the olive harvest, Festival Hazayit. Farmers bringing sacks of bounty to be processed in the Beit Habad, clacking roaring conveyor belts, oily smashed fruit all over the ground. Hummus, pitot, falafel for lunch, and then on to Dir Chana, Debka dancing in a school courtyard, staccato darbuka, bobbing lines of men, linked hands, the leader whirling a handkerchief above his head in the brilliant clear air as the men's heels rang out snap on the pavement, and everyone watched spellbound, clapping in unison. The sunlight faded, and we drove home to supper, baths, the drowsy contentment of a well-spent day, and I turned on the TV evening news, settled down on the couch, only to bolt upright and call out, stunned, "Robin's been shot." So that's change, and then the change can be quite brutal. The following poem was one that I thought about long and hard before I included it in this collection, because I knew that it could well spell trouble for me, that people would think of me as a racist and as a hate monger, and I didn't know if I should risk it. And then I realized that it was part of something that I had to say, that it was my bearing witness to what I felt. So I'm not apologizing, but I'm kind of explaining it. Okay? This is called Lamentations, keynote. It was written in 2022 after the latest slaughter of Jews by terrorists, this time in Elad. Okay. Sweep the broom, wield the dustpan, sweep up the dirt, throw it away, pile dust in a little heap, pick it up, and that's that. The floor's clean, it's okay. Results are predictable. Sweep up the dirt, and the dirt is swept. Sweeping, a meditation on cause and effect. Not like life, when without warning comes an axe and a gun and a brutal, bloody end. Life, no sure cause and effect, nothing following one from the next in any logical, predictable way, at least not for Jews in the land of the Jews, when a calm walk in the evening air can end with a butchering and slaughtering hate. A sudden attack, lightning strike, and then back into the merciless night and the cold winking of electric lights strung along the horizon in far-off Arab towns. The muezzin warbles, it's time for prayer. Time to thank Allah for more Jews slaughtered in their own neck blood, cleaved skulls crumpled, writhing on the ground, gasping to their stunned kids, "Run, tell mommy." Oh, God is great. Allah is great. And the night goes on. Yeah. So living through incident after that, incident after incident after incident, and all I can do is write, and all I can do is reflect on what I feel, and the helplessness I feel, and the anger I feel, and I don't know what to do with it. And I know that sometimes the only thing we can do is to narrow our focus and concentrate on what we can do. So this is called The News from Israel. It was written in 2019. The news from Israel. The radio announcer says, siren, 15 seconds, direct hit. I think, toilet paper, crackers, cat food. The TV announcer says, cabinet member cabinet meeting, reserves, call up. I think canned tuna, bottled water, eggs. The internet says missiles, rockets, firebombs, tunnels, snipers, mines. I think cooking gas, kerosene, batteries, cheese, oil, shampoo. I don't say what I think I know, what I don't want to know, what I don't want to think. And so I keep thinking coffee, aspirin, apples, peanut butter, face cream, soap. And that's it. The next one was written in 2025. It's very recent. And this is another thing that you can do, right? It's called towel poem. A towel is a good thing to keep in a car. You can throw it over your shoulder to block out the sun when you drive. You can wipe the windshield if it gets foggy. You can cushion your seat and mop up spilled drinks. You can throw it on the ground under your body if you have to flee the car and dive into the nearest ditch when rockets split the skies. They can cover you with it if a rocket gets you. Now, having said all that, and I suppose I've depressed the hell out of all of you guys, you might well be asking, is it all bad? And I can call to mind Pandora's box, because you know Pandora's box was opened and all this stuff came out, all the misery and the illness and the devastation and war and so on. And there on the bottom was this one little thing, and it was called hope. So I also have a little thing on the bottom of my box. And this is the last poem in the book, because I did want to end with something a little bit more cheerful. And it's called That Very Human Thing. After the dark comes the light. After the rain comes the sun, or so we hope. But sometimes there is only more dark, more grimy weather, more blustering winds, sheets of rain pounding the pavements, running sores of mud on the hills, hammering hail on the roof, and then exhaustion as night closes down and we huddle around what specks of warmth we find, yearning for a tomorrow when it will be different, when we will be healed, when chaos will sputter and fade away. No one can stop the rain. No one can cancel pain. There is no cure for the human condition. And yet, it is that very human thing, that thing that has no concrete presence, that can't be seen, that can't be touched, that connecting thing that we call love, that gives us strength to face what must be faced, out to the edge of the possible and beyond. And that is another thread running through our history, because when we join forces with each other, we can live and thrive. And all the evil internecine conflict that the politicians love so much is the contra to that. And we have to do everything we can to ignore it and try to concentrate on the connection that we feel with each other. And then we might be okay. So that's it. That's the message I have to give you guys. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if there's anything as hopeless as hope.
Well, as long as we have each other, there is
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah.
There is hope. Okay.
Yeah.
And really, it's the book doesn't contain only
Yeah.
negative stuff, but I wanted to connect up with in every generation, because in every generation we experience such horribleness, and yet we're still here. We are still here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Our next reader is Michael Kagan, and he has requested, Karen, he's requested co-hosting rights, and if you provide it to him, then he'll be happy. Michael?
That's done. Thank you.
Yeah, take it from there.
Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Kagan. I'm going to change the pace a little bit and the direction, and I'm going to play really on the theme in every generation. And if I asked you where that phrase comes from, in every generation, what would be the tune that goes with that?
In every generation, it's from the
B'chol
Haggadah.
dovado, right? It's Pesach, right?
Yeah.
Hi, Pesach. How you doing? Somebody's speaker is on, getting feedback. So what I've been working on for the last 6-7 months is a Haggadah. And I'm going to introduce that Haggadah to you. I've already, for those who don't know, I'm already the author of a previous Haggadah called the Holistic Haggadah, which is sort of a Hasidic, psychological, Zen, Buddhist, introspective journey through the traditional Haggadah, but this is going to be different. And I'm going to start off by saying that last Pesach, I had all my children, my grandchildren, and thank God, and it went on as it usually does till about 2 a.m, and all the kids were still awake, and everyone was buzzing. And one of my granddaughters, one of my more precocious granddaughters, turned to me and said, "Saba, that was great, but why didn't we talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim?" Right? We've done the Haggadah. The Haggadah hardly talks about Yetziat Mitzrayim. It's because it's limud, and it's midrashic limud, and the children who have learnt Shmot and the Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus and all that, expecting that that's what we're going to do on this evening, and we didn't. We read the Haggadah. So that's what she said, and it was the first time I actually thought about that question, that how disappointing it must be for a child not to do Yetziat Mitzrayim. And at the same time, an old friend of mine, Jonathan Lubell, which I think Simon introduced him to me, again, after many, many years, recommended me to author the Aliens Haggadah. And I am going to show you this.
Next Seder will be very, very different. Alongside the traditional Haggadah text, the Aliens Chronicles is a fantasy tale of slavery to freedom from a faraway corner of the galaxy. After decades lying hidden away, documents from the wreck of an alien spacecraft have recently come to light and are now published for the first time. The Deveshniks have had to abandon their planet to allow it to recover from environmental collapse. They journey to the planet Kemet, where they are initially welcomed. But when a new ruler arises, the Deveshniks find themselves enslaved, with their children banished to deep space. The Aliens Chronicles assembles documents, letters, illustrations, and photographs from their epic saga. It also contains extensive notes for parents and teachers, combining historical, midrashic, and fantasy sources. A totally new perspective on the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Its companion volume, The Aliens Haggadah, contains the complete Hebrew text for the Seder, with selected portions in English translation and transliteration. The Aliens Haggadah and the Aliens Chronicles are available separately or as a 2-in-1 combined volume.
As I said, something completely different. So I've been working on the prose and not on the poetry. And sometimes I berate myself, how come I haven't written a poem in such a long time? And then I have to remind myself I've been deeply involved in prose and the writing of this Haggadah. So what I want to do is to share a little bit of the writing. And this, as you saw in the promo film, is the cover from the English side. It's called The Aliens Chronicles. and written by me, illustrated by Daphne Rosin, conceived and edited by Jonathan Lubell. And it's made up of letters. So first of all, let me say, the planet Devesh is Eretz Zavat, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, right? So it's from the Dvash honey. And Kemet, what's Kemet? Anyone know? Kemet is an ancient word for Egypt, meaning black mud, and refers to the fertility of the Nile Delta. Mosel or Mushi is Moses, and King Rami is Ramses the first, Ramses the second. Yam means space, and Miriam is Miriam, of course, and Joshel and Adel and Serach. Serach is a midrashic figure who lived for hundreds of years, the daughter of Asher, the son of Yaakov, and she remembers living in Eretz Canaan and the tragedies that happened there, the environmental collapse and the need to go down to travel to Kemet and then to come back out. Tzip, it's Tzipora, and it goes on. So I want to read just a few samples. You get a taste, and it's not a straightforward narrative. As I said, it's made up of letters from different characters. And these letters were actually found at the site of the crash. And if you go down to the Dead Sea, and instead of turning right south, you turn left to the salt factory that's there on the Jordanian border. It's on our side, there's a salt factory, and you look off the side of the salt factory, you'll see this wreck. And this was the wreck where these letters were found. And nobody could read it. They just looked like blank sheets until it was discovered that they communicate through mind transmission. So we now have transcribed them, and so I don't have to transmit them through my mind. You can read them, or I can read them to you. So this is from Adele, which happens to be the name of my granddaughter. But this is another Adele. And this is written by Joshel. And Joshel is Joshua, who became the leader after Mosel. Dear Adele, I keep hoping this letter will reach you. Everything happened so fast. 1 minute we were slaves confined to our ghettos, and the next we're packing as much as we can carry, boarding those 12 giant Yam transporters and lifting off into the Yam. Everyone rushing, no time to say goodbye, no time for anything. I still don't get why so many people stayed behind. After everything they did to us. Sorry, please don't take that the wrong way. I totally understand about your mum having to take care of your grandpa. And your grandpa, well, he never really liked us Deveshniks, did he? But I wish you would have come. When our Yam ship took off, everyone started celebrating like crazy. People were crying, happy tears. Some were even dancing, those traditional Deveshnik dances that you like so much, round and round. But it was weird too. We were finally free, but we left so many people behind. People like you. And Kemet's pretty much ruined now. I know it was King Rami's fault after being so stubborn, but still. It'll take years to fix. As my Yam ship took off, I looked out the porthole trying to spot you in the crowd. There were so many people saying goodbye, I couldn't see you anywhere. Then, as it climbed higher, I saw our special place, the Kem Yakdun, where we used to lie on our backs and talk about everything. Remember? My eyes got all watery, and then I swear I saw someone making our angel sign in the sand. Was that you? It had to be you. I wanted to signal back so badly. I'll write again soon. Promise. Please look after yourself. Your friend, Josh L. Dear Josh L., I don't know when you'll get this. I hope it's soon. I really hope you made it safely to Devesh. I know we argued about leaving, but that was mostly because my parents were so against it. They see Kemet as home. But honestly, I didn't want you to leave because I didn't want you to leave. I just couldn't just run away and leave them, could I? Would you have? When the transporters were taking off, I ran as fast as I could to our special place, that dune that looks like a giant kemyak, where we used to lie on our backs staring at the stars, where you'd point out that blue dot and tell me stories about Devesh, about how one day we would go back there and live as free Deveshniks, about the huge Chaim trees, about how the planet, yes, the actual planet, has feelings and somehow misses us, even though we hurt her so badly. I lay on my back watching the ships rise, knowing you were in one of them, probably looking down, hoping to see me. So I made an angel in the sand. Remember how I taught you? I spread my arms and legs and swept them back and forth. I wonder if you saw it. I really hope you did. Then we have Serach telling the whole background about the trees. The Chaim trees are very special trees. They have the highest density of energy of all things in the universe other than nuclear force. You could take a cutting from the tree and you could have a barbecue last for weeks. The energy density is so high that you can power your ships with them and travel interplanetary across the galaxy. And they are native to Devesh, the Chaim tree, and they were over-harvested and eventually died out. And that's what caused the famine in the land, or in the planet of Devesh. Here is the Kemet visa for Benjel Kobitson. Okay, Benjamin, the son of Kobe, the son of Jacob. It includes messages from the royal palace about the king's messages, messages from Shipua, who was told to kill the children of the Deveshniks. And then things start going wrong. When the new king rises and you get the equivalent of the Nuremberg laws against the Deveshniks. Henceforth, Deveshnik aliens shall no longer be considered citizens of the sacred planet Kemet. Henceforth, the Deveshnik aliens shall no longer be permitted to hoist or lower the sacred Kemetian flag. Henceforth, the Deveshnik aliens shall no longer have land rights or own property, have own businesses with Kemetians, be permitted to eat the sacred Kemetian Kemyak, be permitted to eat fresh laughter, converse in the sacred Kemetian language, be permitted to marry Kemetians. Kemetian aliens must wear the symbol of the Mavet tree, the badge of shame. And then things go wrong. There is a character, and if you remember the film The Ten Commandments, the character Edward G. Robinson plays, Datan. Do you remember that film? Do you remember Edward G. Robinson, the slimy capo? So I have a character called the Thug. He's one of the Deveshniks, and he's an equivalent to that, just a little bit rougher. I'll try and do his voice justice. Name's the Thug. Thuggy to my friends. Not that I got many, but who needs them anyway? Follow rules? Me? Ha! That's rich. Ever since I was a kid, when everyone went left, I went right. When they said jump, I said make me. Following orders is for suckers. Winners make their own rules. Write that down, kiddos. I never cared what others thought. Some call me bad, evil, hypocrite. That's rich, isn't it? Like the pot calling the kettle black. You can call me whatever. You can call me whatever. I do my own thing. If someone gets hurt, should have been more careful. Bet you're asking, was I ever violent? Nah, never. Well, not really. And if I was, they deserved it. Not saying I was, though. Just saying. Look, it's like this. Does fire apologize to the moth? Nah, it's nature. Law of the jungle. Big Kemyak eats little Kemyak. Survivor of the smartest. That's me. Survivor number one. Numero uno. When King Rami started this slavery thing, know what I saw? Opportunity. While everyone cried, boo-hoo, poor us, I was thinking, crisis equals opportunity. Rami's clever. The way he did it, slowly, like putting a Kemyak in water, turning up the heat. They don't notice until, snap, boiled Kemyak. One day the Deveshniks are big shots. Next thing they know, nothing. No money, no houses, no fancy jobs. Beautiful. Not for them, for me. Desperate people get desperate in desperate times. They needed someone to buy their stuff. Enter the thug, the pawn shop king. Whatever I offered, they agreed. No choice. So it goes on, the story, each time from a different point of view. One of the things that we know about Moses from this week's Parsha, right? It says kaved desvatayim, that he had a stutter or a lisp. So in my story, we go into him growing up, Mosel growing up in the palace, and as you can see in the pictures, the Deveshniks are bluish and the Kemites are greenish. And so Mushi grows up in the palace and everyone knows he's an outsider. I mean, look at the color, look at his nose. Everyone knows that he's one of them and not one of us. And he's tormented. And this being tormented as a young kid causes him to suffer from glossophobia. And glossophobia is the fear of speaking in public. So, and this accounts for Moses' hesitation in wanting to stand up to the king and protest on behalf of his people. Here is an announcement from the palace by the evil King Rami. Loyal citizens of Kemet, this is your king. We are passing through difficult times, but victory is assured. This war is a war on the essence of what it is to be a Kemetian. We Kemetians are a proud and generous people. And this rebellion, by the aliens we accepted with open arms in their time of need, is a cowardly and treacherous act of the ungrateful. Their leader was like a son to my father, like a brother to me. I rose above our differences and loved him like my own blood. And how did he repay this love? With treachery. So he goes on and sets the scene for enslaving the Deveshniks. And in fact, the story behind it is he wants to gain the power of the tree of energy. There's the times of Kemet. If anybody knows the times of Israel, this is the times of Kemet, and this is a Trump-like press conference. Here. Questions? Yes. When will all this end? Are we to expect more calamities? And what are the royal palace and the armed forces doing to protect us? King Rami, hell be his name, gives his royal assurance that the last calamity was the last calamity. And how can he guarantee that? Next question, please. And so the press conference goes on. The calamities are not as dreadful as in our Haggadah, the last one being laughter. where people were cracking up from laughter rather than death of the firstborn. I don't think we should have death of the firstborn in our Haggadot and have our children singing songs about the death of firstborn. I felt that laughter is a much better way to go. And then there is the Great Yam Barrier, which protects the planet. And originally it was to protect it from the outsiders coming in, and now it's from the insiders escaping out. And the energy for the Great Yam Barrier is produced by plantations of the Chaim tree that provides the energy. And the Chaim tree is in cahoots with the fleeing Deveshniks, and just as the Deveshnik ships are approaching the Great Yam Barrier, being chased by the forces, the spaceships of the Comatians, the Chaim trees cut off the power supply, the barrier falls, the Deveshniks can pass through it, and as the Comatians are following, the power comes back on, and we all know the rest. There are songs. May they float in peace, the end of King Rami and his forces. You have the first Seder on the ship with different signs for that we have on, similar to what we have on our Seder table. The hero of it all is actually Miriam. And she is the one who defeats the thug who tries a coup d'etat on the ships, just like Korach did or Datan did in Sefer Bamidbar. And she is the one that wins the day, and they all the baddies get shot out into space, and there's a big celebration. There is the giving of the 10 principles. Remember, you were slaves and were freed. You have sacred responsibility. Never forget where you came from. Rest every 8 days as evidence you're free. Why 8 days? Because on each hand they have 4 fingers. It's easy to keep count. Never enslave another alien. Treat all aliens fairly. Respect nature. Don't abuse the Chaim trees. No monopolies on resources. Leave the trees alone every 8 years. These rules are for you to live by. To which everybody says, Naseh v'nishma. And right at the end, on the last page, I had discussed this with my granddaughter, Adele, who starts the story. And I told her how the story was going, and she says, oh, that's so beautiful. Josh L. and Adele, they were friends. And what happens at the end? Do they get back together again? And I said, no. Adele stays behind in Europe and dies in Auschwitz with her parents and everybody else. I didn't use that terminology, but she stays behind in Egypt with the other 6 million Jews. That's the count, the 6 million Jews who were in Egypt, and were never heard of again. And Adele starts crying. And she said, no, you can't do that. And I thought about it, and I said, okay, so let's go for a happy ending. So here is the last letter. This is written by Josh L., who is now the leader. Captain's log, star date 2488.5. For those for nostalgic reasons, I called it that. I thought I'd completed this stage of my journey and could finally close and seal my captain's log. But then something amazing happened. This is now my final entry. Not long after we landed, we picked up strong radio signals in the Cometian language. How was this possible? The signals seemed to come from somewhere on the planet, and by our calculations, not too far away. And remember, they're on Devesh now. Someone was asking who we were and why we had come to Devesh. Were Rami's forces waiting for us? Was the fight to continue here on our home planet? I took a small team and flew to where the signals originated. From high up, I was amazed to see a settlement that looked just like the ones we lived in back in the land of Lush, in Kemet. We landed next to a solitary Commission yam ship. A group of about 20 people approached, devs and chems together. The leader was about my age. She carried the traditional Deveshnik welcome gift of laughter and juice. She smiled, and in that smile, I recognized someone I thought I'd lost forever. Adele? I asked, hardly believing my eyes. Yes, Joshel, it's me, she answers with a grin. What took you so long? We fell into each other's arms, hugging and crying. She was still wearing the pendant I had given her, the one with the half leaf from the Chaim tree. How had she gotten here? After we left Kemet, everything fell apart and life became very dangerous. Adele's parents finally decided to get their daughter off the planet, and with a group of others she traveled directly to Devesh, expecting to find us already here building new homes. But we were nowhere to be found. They had been waiting for 40 years. You're late, she said, still smiling, but not too late. And that's the end of the story. There are notes, and then on the other side you have the Haggadah as the film showed. Please God, it will be out in Hebrew, all in Hebrew before Pesach. It's now out in English, as you saw. It's been distributed now in America. If anybody wants a copy, they can get them from me. If anyone wants to write a review, please do. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Oops, I went a bit too long. Sorry.
Thank you, Michael. It's very interesting. Reminiscent
Something
of Star.
completely different.
Yeah, now for something completely different. Yeah. For our final, a reader will introduce Karen, who needs no introduction. Everybody knows her. Karen, tell us something about yourself and about what you're going to read.
Oh, I can't tell you about myself. I don't know how to. I can tell you about this book. I can tell you that this is, I think, my 40th book. No, it's my 39th book. My 40th book just came out in Hebrew, called Here Lie Poets in Their Graves, if in English, but it's in Hebrew, and I'm looking for a publisher in English. This book is most important to me. This is about the Holocaust. I thought this is a terrible way to end an evening of poetry, especially if we're talking about, all the things that connect us, b'chol dor v'dor, in every generation. And we've talked about the Haggadah, and we've talked about this war, and we've talked about the situation of pressure. And I am now feeding you something else, something more about, to make you depressed, about the Holocaust. The book, though, is called Survivors. My parents were orphaned by the Holocaust, and my mother's 7 siblings with their spouses and their children and families, they all disappeared. So it isn't surprising that I'm obsessed about this subject. And I also grew up surrounded by Holocaust survivors, not only because my parents were survivors themselves, but as soon as they managed to find a safe place to live, they began to take in refugees, sometimes whole families, into our home. They helped them to find jobs, they places to stay, they arranged community activities, sometimes saved their lives, sometimes didn't manage to save their lives. And they listened to their stories. And I was always underfoot. Literally. Sometimes I was under the table. Sometimes I was sent to teach refugee children English. Sometimes I was babysitted. Sometimes I babysat. Sometimes it was just a picnic. For years, I've been writing about them, about these people, trying to tell their stories. And most of the poems were published, some in various journals around the world and in various books of mine, in Polish and French, Russian, Yiddish, Hebrew, Danish. Sorry, I'm still admitting people. But it was only after October 7th, when I felt I might not survive the rockets, that I felt the poems had to be published together in a book, and as soon as possible. The organization was simple, just because everybody had been telling me stories and I had all kinds of memories mixed in with my family history. I just had to put them together. The cover was simple for me as well. I had a photograph of one of my many picnics. One of the many organizations of survivors had in the park in Rochester, New York, and I slapped it on the cover. Only after it came out did I realize that not only was I in the photograph, but I remembered I was the one here. This is the picture. I was the one in the corner shouting, "I'm not a refugee," to the photographer. I was the one saying, "Hey, I'm not one of them," but I was, apparently. My brother's next to me, and it came out in the soft cover, but not the hardcover. This is the first book I ever really published myself. I thought I had to. Neither of us, not my brother and I, remember any of the names of the people in the groups, and I thought later this group was called the Mordechai Analevich Society, after the history of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. So I published the book on Amazon while Iran was pelting us with rockets. And as soon as the rockets were over, I went on to less painful projects. Yet these people should be remembered and what they went through. So I'd like to read a few poems about them. The first is a kind of introduction. When they tell you to remember, they mean there's a possibility you might forget. But within me are brothers and sisters who were never born. It has nothing to do with memory. The second poem is called Absence. "What are you looking for?" we'd ask Mother, as she rummaged a cupboard or a drawer or the phone book. "My lost youth," she'd answer, absent-mindedly, having forgotten whatever had occupied her mind when she first began to search. The bombs, the soldiers, the streets covered with bodies, the stories of the children smashed against the wall, her babies washed down the drain in the bathtub in Danzig, they were always right there. In the cupboard, the drawer, the book next to the telephone. I got so excited about that poem that I actually put it in by mistake twice. Not because I liked it, but because it had to be told. Refugees. My parents escaped from Lithuania because my father was an ex-con and was going to be or would be arrested again and imprisoned again. So they escaped in 1933 to Danzig, the international city. And they escaped essentially all of the terrible things that their families endured, all the camps and all the tragedies. So this poem is called Refugees. My parents would never go back to Lida, For them it was a grave, an open pit they had escaped once that would swallow them whole should they ever draw near. There was nothing she could tell me without crying, even about the house in the marketplace, the chickens in the yard, the synagogue next door, for which grandfather would wake the neighbors banging on their shutters. Prayers, Jews. And my father, too, said nothing, even though their parents, both of them, lived next door to each other, and the grandmothers met on their doorsteps each day to share the moment of air and perhaps the gossip of the day. So many years of Lida, so many bodies of so many hearts no longer beating. Rarely was any one name on the lips of my mother without all the others pouring from her eyes. And for me, too, it is impossible to return and not to. Whoa, I have cut myself out. No, they're tattoos. At the annual picnic of the New Immigrant Society in the park shelters at Ontario Lake Beach, while all the children went to swim, I disguised my fear of water and assuaged my boredom by concentrating on organizing the numbers exposed to the sun on the refugees' arms into some kind of arithmetical sequence. I knew enough to be discreet, counting the history of their agonies without looking directly at the tattoos. But their arms were bare, exposed, as they sat telling indiscreet tales around the samovar and the hill of sugar, and they had nothing to hide from one another. Now I cannot remember a single cipher, except the number 1 that looked so much more fundamental than what we learned in math class. Just 2 more. Hang on. Learning to ride a bicycle. Ignatz would trot behind my roadmaster as I tried to grasp very slowly the principles of balance. I would envision his carefully combed hair flying behind him as he raced along. But I forced myself not to look, not to see his hands. 2 fingers on the left and 3 on the right. Not to think of how the punishment of severed digits must have felt. For days, for miles, he taught me to ride, mangled hands grasping the shiny bicycle, breathlessly shouting at me to focus on the road, while as much as I longed to fly free with my bike, my wobbly body remained with those fingers left on the ground. I think I'm going to skip because I think these are too much even for me. Willie Neisner. Willie Neisner was the only one of the many refugees that my father befriended entirely and felt was his best friend. My father was not a very friendly person. Willie Neisner, he was the only one of his kin who survived, but he never told us where he was in the war or who he left behind. That tiny orphan with a sheepish smile. I often think of him, his little body, his protruding ears, and his pale freckled skin. He wore a blue striped suit that might have fit him before the war, but was now big enough to have an identity of its own, giving him strong shoulders and a manly frame. At first he lived with us, and then at the Y, And when we saw him, it always felt like our brother who managed to survive and was now making his way in the world. I don't know why, but I can never forget the last time we met, just before he hung himself. I can't even give you a positive poem, a little happy verse to end. You know that I usually like to concentrate on lighter verses, but these poems in Survivors was all I could get out at that time. And I hope that we can, in the question and answers, we can get in a few jokes when we start talking. Thank you all.
Thank, thank you very much, Karen. Thank you.
And I think that what we should do now is open the floor to questions for everyone, for all four of us who are so different and have presented such different things, even though we may be alike in many ways. Open the floor and ask the audience to ask Mike to ask questions, and ask the participants, the authors, to ask or to comment on this whole question of in every generation, something that phrase that was repeated not just every year, but in every incident that we went through as Jews in the United States. So,
Karen, I would just like to say, of course, you read poems, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. You read poems that had to be spoken aloud, and it was your requirement because you knew. And so I think it's a good thing. Not everything has to be happy and
yeah.
brainless. But I think that you're also working on, or you at least had an idea for a new book that you were talking about about the graveyard.
Oh, Poets in Their Graves, which is absolutely the most fun that
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
sitting behind me
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
We,
So I think it kind of reminded me of there was also an American poet that wrote about in about the 1800s or so about the graveyard. Well, just his name escapes me, but it's a good tradition to write about the stories for on various gravestones. Who was it?
Edgar
Edgar, Edgar Masters, right?
Lee Masters.
Edgar Lee Masters. So that that's not related to yours, but another one who wrote
That,
about graveyards, and it was a great book of poetry.
that's one is behind me, and
Yeah,
it came out in Hebrew. Uh,
yeah.
that one, I have to tell you one thing about that one. That it started out when Ezzy and I landed in Newark Airport at 5 o'clock in the morning and had nothing to do. Because we couldn't go see my brother who lives not far from there. We said, "What are we gonna? What should we do?" And I said, "Well, in Allen Ginsberg's poem, Don't Grow Old, he tells you exactly where his graveyard is. He says what route, how to get there, who's there, everything." So we went there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we filmed the sunrise in the in the graveyard. And there's a beautiful family plot with many Ginsbergs and Guy de Max and all the people he talks about in his poetry. And it says on the tombstone, Mishorer Hador Doresh Ha'ichud.
Wow.
Means to someone who knows Hebrew, it means nothing. You know that it was written by someone who doesn't know Hebrew, and that he's not even there. There's only one third of him, and I just have to tell you this. It was one third of him, of his ashes in that grave, one third in the Shambhala uh, Buddhist site in New York, and one third in Colorado in the uh, yeah, as you know, as I think. And when I talked to his secretary about it, and I said, "Isn't that amazing that he did that?" He said, "No, that's not true because there was a tablespoon that I kept to spread on Harazetim,
Yeah, wow.
Haratzofim, excuse me."
Uh-huh.
So I mean, that's got to be a good story,
Yeah,
and
excellent.
very different from every other story.
Yeah.
All right, so that okay. You got me on this this
Yeah.
this other
The
subject.
graveyard shift.
Yeah. Uh,
Yes.
okay, but I don't know if any of you have questions. We You can even put them in the chat if you're embarrassed to ask them, but you can also um you know you
Can
can
I
ask
ask a question?
yourself. Camilla.
Yeah, Karen. I'm slowly recovering from listening to you read. Do you have conversations with the people who you're writing about? Do you talk to them in your mind and say, "How are you? Have I done you justice?"
Uh, I don't ask about whether I've done them justice. I talk to my mother a lot.
Mm-hmm.
My mother spoke perhaps too much, gave me too many details, and I didn't talk about all of them. And I ask for her forgiveness about that because she really wanted her stories told, and it was the wrong time. It was the time after the war. It was the time to build a new life, and that is something that we need to remember always. It's another thing that we have to do in every generation is to, you know, start something again and start it right.
Yeah.
Karen,
I
I was
think,
just thinking, with the exception of
yeah.
Michael, who is trying to address the next generation successfully, I wondered, as I was overwhelmed by the readings this evening, whether you think that we've succeeded, that because whether the next generation indeed will carry the desire, the memory, the desire to remember, the necessity to remember. I think that's what most of us have in our hearts when we're writing these poems, but I don't know whether we're successful.
It's difficult. Yeah.
Let me just say that you said, with the exception of Michael, actually the core of what I didn't read out, that the core is about memory.
I
And within
understood that,
this,
but you were speaking of you were speaking a language that I think you were trying to address the younger generation in their vernacular, whereas the rest of you are expressing the burden of the past and the present, but I wonder whether we're successful and whether that in transmitting to our
You know
children.
what, though, Ricky, when you're writing, you're not thinking about am I going to transmit this effectively or whatever. You're in the thing itself. You are the thing you are writing. And afterwards, when it's, cooling on the page or wherever it is, you can say, well, why did I do that? What's it for? Is it going to do anybody else any good? But all we can do is be ourselves, and all we can bring to the zirah, the scene is what we've got inside us, and it's not up to. I don't know if the next generation can lean on our memories and and understand that they move forward from that. There's also the question of transmission changes. Michael has more or less addressed that, but previous generations, they saw poetry as a different medium also. It was much more formal. It was a lot longer. People memorized big hunks of it, but it's different in each generation. The form itself changes. So I don't know. How can I know? How can we know?
Yeah, I guess I'm asking a question because when I write, I do have a target audience. I became more aware of it recently. I'm addressing my grandchildren, sometimes with great frustration because I don't think that I'm speaking their language.
You can't be.
No.
I never tried. In fact, until recently, I would not even think of bothering children with stories of such of such pain. I think that I would have thought that I would teach them a more positive way to approach life. But I think the positive way to approach life is to incorporate everything that has happened. And I think that's what Michael is trying to do, is to incorporate what has happened. I had this question to you, Michael, about changing the dead, the firstborn, the death of the firstborn, to laughter, because I think some kind of pain is involved here, not but but I think it's very important to incorporate the past. And
I understand the parents' desire to save the children from sadness, protect them from sadness, but when we do that, we deny them to teach them to empathy and understand our sadness and hear the stories. I know in Israel there's so many stories about Holocaust survivors. They came to Israel and they refused to talk about it to their children. And so a whole generation went by, and when they finally grew up to, develop human emotions like empathy and they wanted to come back, it was too late because the survivors had already passed away. So we have an obligation, I think. I know that Shimon Peres once said that instead of spending so much time studying history in the past, we should spend more time studying the future. And it was very interesting, very interesting. He said it at my youngest son's graduation ceremony, and I was very impressed. But I think he was actually quoting somebody else who was the originator of that phrase. Ben Gurion actually had said it at first, but he mentioned it in his speech. But I think that in a way, I kind of rebelled against. I said we need to study both. We need to study our history and we need to study our future too. But it's important to raise children with the ability, with the emotional depth, to understand other people's pain and where they came from.
I don't think Michael was. We're all talking for you, Michael, but I don't think Michael was suggesting like using.
You can buy my
laughter
Haggadah.
Well, I'm going to carry on talking for you anyway. I don't think you were suggesting, laughter instead of the death of the firstborn because you were trying to save the children or anything. I think what you were trying to do was possibly to save us from feeling gleeful at the thought of this awful thing that happened as a result, yes, of Pharaoh not letting the children of Israel leave. But it's a question whether cause and effect. That's a terrible thing to have done. I think in some way that you're opening that conversation.
Yeah.
Forgive me if I'm wrong. And I also think that you're not. The whole what's central to the whole to the whole story, and our use of the story is tell the story, remember the story.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what language you do it in, and if you do it in a way that might capture an audience that otherwise might not be captured, or just another take on it, the more tellings, the better. That's what happens in folk traditions. They do move, they do change. I know as far as what do we tell our children, my poems are not this particular group of poems is not about the Holocaust, but I do know that I gave a few, when it came out, one of our children lives in Berlin, and we were there visiting, and I gave him his copy of my book, and his daughter, who I suppose was about 10 at the time, at some point said, I want to read this. And I thought, well, will you read some of it to me? So I said, yes, of course I will, thinking, which ones shall I read? They're all pretty grim. And how do I explain them? So I chose one, which was about her father, and I read it. And I said, so what do you think? She told me what the poem meant. And then she said, give me another one. So I gave her another one. And then she said, I want a longer one. So I read a longer one. I'm not drawing any lesson or conclusion from this. I'm just saying that if our poems if these dark poems are true to that darkness, then it is imperative that we write them because they other people at the time, and then maybe after we're gone, have to understand what we were doing, what we were trying to do to maybe not change things, but at least shed some light on it, some light on why killing of the firstborn seems awful. What is it that we were doing at that time? And how did we use, Mike, I absolutely agree with you. Our pasts are hugely, but the future comes from our past. So
Right.
How did we use our past to create this conversation that we're having, hopefully through more generations than our own? It needs to be not clear in terms of points 1, 2, and 3. It needs to be emotionally clear. It needs to be as close to what we mean as possible. As dark as it is, and Karen, the poems are as I think Mike said, they're to be heard, and you in reading them, you breathe life into that page. Poetry isn't about pages; it was always spoken. And here you are bringing those people into wherever it is we are today. Very important.
Whoa. Can I ask everyone who isn't speaking to mute? And if they want to speak, let's see you.
Can I say something really quickly if there's nobody else who's jumping in with questions or something?
Jump in, Sean.
Yay. Okay, so first and foremost, I am the youngest parent here. I am nowhere near anything resembling the caliber of scholar that anybody else here is. And so my opinion should count for absolutely nothing. That being said, I have something important to say that I always try to say to Karen, but she always shuts me up when I say it in person. But she can't shut me up this time, so I get to say it. This is the one thing that I have to say. This is the one thing that I might be able to bring into this conversation. The only thing that I might be able to contribute that the other distinguished members here might not be able to. Some crazy how I lucked into running my own political risk consultancy for long duration capital, which means that I do political risk assessments for investments that span somewhere between 15 to 30 years into the future. And the core of my work revolves around the fact that there isn't a single Western government that is capable of dealing with the fact that over the next, say, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, about 40 to 60% of the world, I'm talking about the advanced world at this point, I'm not even talking about the developing, the global south, I'm talking about the advanced world. The percentages that I mentioned, roughly that amount of the advanced world is going to die from the consequences of climate change. And there isn't a single Western government who is currently capable of dealing with that. I raised that in the context of Karen's poetry for the very simple reason that as a young parent, I am already now trying to grapple with the question of how I raise my daughter to simultaneously remain human under those conditions, to remember everybody she is inevitably going to lose, and to carry on in their memory and in their name. In that context, Karen, your poetry isn't dark. Your poetry is the only light we may end up having. And that's why every single one of your books is already on her bookshelf. There is nothing more important than your poetry of memory. There is nothing more important than learning how to keep those stories alive in our hearts, because they keep us human and they will allow us to carry on, and they remind us that in some way, shape, or form, we will have already been here before when all of this starts happening sooner rather than later. And that's all I have to say. And you always shut me up when I try to say this in person, but now you can't, so I got to say it.
I got to be polite. Yes.
There you go, exactly.
Okay.
Can I
Thanks.
say one more
Who
thing?
was that? Who was that who was speaking?
Nobody
Sorry.
of any consequence whatsoever.
No, yeah, very funny. Who was that speaking? I don't know who it was.
His name is Sean.
Erstwhile annoying student of Karen's. That's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Sean, thank you.
I'd like to say one more thing about these dark stories. I work with refugees a great deal. Most of the books written for me are written by refugees, and many of them are second generation. And they grew up in a house where people couldn't tell them what had happened. It was too dark. And it haunted the children.
Mhm.
They needed to hear these stories from somebody. And I felt when I was listening tonight that these are stories that we really have to share, because otherwise they're like ghosts and monsters, and nobody will understand where the fear comes from or the distrust unless we're prepared to talk about it.
Yes.
I would like to say something, which is that I think that the most important thing is to bear witness. I do, and it doesn't matter. Simon did it, I did it, Rick, Karen did it. Michael was like around the corner from it, but if we're true to ourselves and we try to present the thing to catch the moment and say, this is it, this is what is now. I think that it's an important task of ours. That's how I see it.
I'd like to add something. One of the last paragraphs in the Haggadah, I think we all know this, but I'd just like to read it because I think it touches upon what Simon and others have said and written. At the end of Joshel's final letter to Adele, he says, P.S. I almost forgot the craziest part. Moselle, this is sitting around their first Seder night on the ship after having fled. Moselle made us spill drops of juice for each calamity that hit Kemet, like we were crying for our enemies. Someone started to protest, but Moselle just put his finger to his lips. He said, if we can't close our hearts, he said, we can't close our hearts even to them. Then he listed all 10 calamities, while tears ran down the side of the cups. And that's what I wish to instill as part of our memory.
Okay.
is empathy and compassion, not just memory.
So
I'd,
important.
I'd like to say one thing about, again, your, Michael, your Haggadah and the changing the final, the death of the firstborn to laughter because you were concerned with explaining it to your granddaughter or to your daughter, your granddaughter probably. I was also thinking, how would I explain it? You know, the death of the firstborn. If you remember, you know, because what it implies is that God, our God, the one that we worship, is killing babies. You know, it doesn't matter. It's the Pharaoh's babies, etc. And I just thought of one way that it could be uh, explained in a way that a child could understand. And if you know that, you know, when Moses came to the Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go," uh, and he refused, the Pharaoh refused, then the first plague was put upon the Pharaoh, and then he refused again and again. And if you look at the plagues that were that God caused the Pharaoh, they rose in increasing order. In other words, God did not at the first plague kill the firstborn. He tried to persuade by using weaker plagues, and the plagues got worse and worse and worse as God attempted to persuade the Pharaoh. And finally, when nothing, he came to the conclusion that nothing would persuade the Pharaoh. He did the final plague of killing the firstborn. I think that shows in a way an attempt not to do it, but when all else fails, and God wanted to let his people go, then he was left with no recourse except to kill the firstborn. So in a way, that's a way of explaining it to a child that might be he didn't want to. It was clear from the order in which the plagues were executed that kind of shows that there was a moral consideration here.
Moral consideration.
I think that's very optimistic of you.
Well, then why didn't
drawing
God?
an analogy to what's going on now?
So no,
No. Let's not get into
one
well,
to a
look,
worse to the ultimate.
our political leaders are not God. That's for sure.
Did God not harden Pharaoh's heart?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I
Is
don't
that in
think
the
we should get into biblical exegesis
God didn't
right
have
now.
to. I mean, you know, just because God, what does this mean? God had, I'm sorry, but what does it mean God had no alternative? I mean, so then, what God is supposed, well, if God's as powerful as God, you know, in this story is, what does that mean? He had no alternative. There was no alternative.
I think we are in the realm of biblical exegesis that may be beyond the framework of this evening. But
I mean, you could say the same thing about Karen's experiences and Karen's book.
Yeah,
Yes,
but I'd like to
you get back
respond
to the
to
same.
yeah, I'd like to respond to Simon. Has anybody read the book Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People?
Yes.
And I read it when my father passed away. The Temple Brotherhood, sent me a copy of the book, and I read it, and it was very interesting. He came up with something like a syllogism. One of there are three statements about God, and one of them, cannot be true. For instance, the first statement is God is all powerful, And this was in reference to actually based on the story of the book of Job, in which, if you remember, God was making a bet or gambling bet with the devil about whether Job's worship or religiosity was strong enough, and the devil said that he could probably tempt Job away. So they made a bet, and so the syllogism in the book was either God is all powerful, or God is good, or God is a one of the two out of three statements. The third I don't remember exactly, but it can't be if he's a good God, then he's obviously not all powerful. That was the conclusion.
Archibald MacLeish has a play of
Yeah.
of Job called
Yeah.
JP, and the syllogism there is repeated.
Yeah.
I heard upon his dry dung heap that man cry out who could not sleep. If God is God, he is not good. If God is good, he is not God. Take the even, take the odd. I would not stay here if I could.
Wow.
It's
Is it all?
I don't know why that play isn't
It
all
should
over
be.
the place all the
Yeah,
time,
it should be.
because that's where we've been. But what we've been talking about isn't God. It's the way we cope with what the way we cope with what has happened, what happens, the way we teach I think what Michael is talking about, the way we teach our children how we can connect to them and help them get through all the things
Yeah.
that happen to us now. Uh, uh, Ricky was asking before, about what uh, whether our children will be able to stomach to take this kind of history, to use it, and I think that it's in our blood, that it's something that happens, uh, that we have to pass on, and we want, whether we want to or not, and we do whether we do or not, whether we say it or not.
You
Uh,
know, you know what? You know what? I think it's very important. I don't know about sugarcoating or not sugarcoating, but I think that when I look back on history, on Jewish history, okay, I'll be specific, and I see all the horrible things that have happened throughout this generation, the generation before that, the generation before that, and yet we are still here. It gives me hope. It
yes.
does. Because I think it's possible to survive. It's possible to survive bad times. And it's necessary to teach kids that there were bad times and not to, rub their faces in it, but when the time comes to tell them about bad things, you have to tell them. I know that in my family, my father-in-law, when he was a young father, he had been in World War II. He had been in the liberation of a camp. He had taken pictures of the horrors that he saw, and he showed them to my husband when my husband was very young and gave him a terrible trauma that I think lasted to now. And there's a time to do these things and there's a time not to do these things. But once the time comes, you have to do it. You have to do it. And then okay, what now? What now and what's in the future?
That's right.
Well, I think the power of your work, Anne, and Simon's is, especially yours, is you're only writing about what happened 2 years ago.
No,
Yes.
no, no. The
Well,
poems
the
actually
poems, whatever, the poems that you read are about
Recent past.
recent past. Okay, let's
recent
not put a
past.
date. Recent past. And
Yeah.
Simon's as well is filled with recent past. And Karen's is a bit more a generation past. And mine is many generations past. But
And future.
unfortunately, we're a people where as soon as we stop remembering, we have more cause to be reminded.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And that's an unfortunate part of our history. Like, we could have done without this war. Now we're going to have to build on how do we remember this war? Well, what about the one before that? Oh, well, we have another set of poetry about that, and we have 1948, and then we have the Holocaust, and we have the Kinot from Tisha B'Av, and but
Yeah.
and it's not, and the answer is not how can we remember all this, but how do we
pass it on?
Incorporate.
It's not just passing it on. It's how it's part of what we're doing, I believe, is transmuting it or integrating and then transmuting, so we ourselves can go on. It's not about the future of the next generation. It's about us. How do we go on? I mean, how do you get up in the morning? Like, how do we go on?
How do we go on? Is we say cat litter, soap. We put one foot in front of the other.
That's one way of doing it.
Yeah.
That's your
But
way of doing it. Other people do it.
That is one way of doing it.
I think
that's
we're
your way.
fortunate as poets that we can express some of it.
Yes.
I think that that's one of the few optimistic things I can say
About being a poet.
after an evening like this.
Well, I think that we have reached our limit of 2 hours of discussion in every generation. And I think that it was a fascinating discussion, a fascinating reading, and you all have so much. You have contributed so much to this evening in your questions, and I don't know how to thank you all.
Gary does. Gary knows how to thank us. But
Okay.
Karen, let's just Karen, Anne. So where can we get your book from? I mean, let's tell.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon.
This
Mr.
here
Marcus.
is available on Amazon, and it even is available in digital form.
Yeah.
Maybe we should post this on the somewhere in written form so that people kind of summary of tonight who presented and the books and where they're available.
Yeah.
Well, for the record, mine's on Amazon too, and in a bookshop called Adraba in Jerusalem.
Excellent.
Where?
On Amazon, but also, or from the press itself, but from there's a bookshop in Jerusalem called Adraba that carries it.
Where is Adraba?
Adraba is in Rehavia.
A
lovely name. Good
Adraba.
Great name, isn't it?
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mike.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
And peace.
Perfect. You were a perfect addition. I think that this was a perfect group, and because we're so different. Thank you so much, and good night.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Turn off the recording.
recording, yeah.
Recording. What recording? It disappeared long ago.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good night.